Hi,
Hey Ryan,
Chris.
how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good, very well. Just so you know, we're live already.
Yes. So, hello, everyone.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much for joining and for having me on. We're doing recording of the Vegan Report.
Yes. So, at the same time as this streaming, um, live streaming, we are recording an episode of the Vegan Report podcast. I really wanted to discuss, the intersection of intelligence and veganism, vegetarianism with you. This is a topic that it fascinates me so much. Part of it because of my background. I was, for many years, the vice president of the Quebec Association for Giftedness. So we would approach, psychologists, teachers, medical doctors, and inform them about what giftedness was, what high intelligence or high intellectual potential was, how to recognize it in people, and how to adopt their practice, teaching, and so on to that audience. And so I have, some background in that field, and the idea that veganism and intelligence might be in some way linked is an exciting idea.
Oh, awesome. Okay, that's so cool. So I know you as the Vegan Report guy, but you also actually have a extended background in gifted children, I guess, is it?
Well, that was volunteering. I was volunteering as the vice president of that association because that's a cause that resonates with me. But yeah, I should maybe introduce myself. I am
Please.
the host of the Vegan Report podcast. I'm also a development consultant. What that means is that I fundraise for different causes. One of them being Dharma Voices for Animals, the only international Buddhist organization in operation. We approach Buddhist institutions and Buddhist leaders and mobilize them in the fight for animal rights. It's a great organization that does amazing work in the US, in a little bit in Europe, but mostly in Asia. So an area of animal rights that is often, underfunded. You know, doing some impact and progress in Asia is really important. That's where most of the animal exploitation will be in the future. So yeah, I do that. I'm also the founder of Map Your Health, which is an app that allows you to track environmental health risks in your surrounding. So I'm very much an entrepreneur in spirit. I love leading different projects and being independent minded like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, nice. So you have a pretty wide ranging set of interests then. Yeah, awesome. And I'll show you send me a link for Map Your Health so I can show that on stream as well.
Thank you. Yes, that's appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how would you like to do this? Do you have questions for me, or we'll just sort of chat openly?
I mean, let's just chat. I mean, you shared two studies relating to veganism, vegetarianism, and intelligence. The first one was co-authored by that Gale professor, who I tried to get on my podcast. I messaged her, I sent her like 1,000 emails, but she never responded. And I feel like there was some tension between the researchers in that, um, in doing that research. I don't know why. I'm reminded of reading something about how there was tension between those researchers, how they did not agree on lots of things about animal rights and veganism and all of that. Anyway, so maybe that's because that's why she never replied to my emails. And then you also shared a study about cognitive decline, or something like that, related to meat consumption. So yeah, maybe to start, you could maybe discuss. We could discuss those two studies. How did they come on your radar, and why did you decide to share them on LinkedIn?
Yes. All right. Well, yeah, let's get into it. So, yeah, the last part of the question's an interesting one. There was definitely some people who were pleased to see this news, and some people who are certainly not pleased to see this news of the association between, higher cognitive function and likelihood of being vegetarian, basically, vegetarian or vegan. So there was two. So I shared 3 studies, and then I also commented on a 4th, which I think is what you're talking about with the cognitive decline, which somebody else had shared. So the first 2 that I shared were associations between meat consumption and lower cognitive function, as the authors gently put it. And those are just correlative and showing that generally, people who were self-identifying as vegetarian or vegan performed better at various cognitive challenges that are given. So there was some almost like a test within the survey that people took, and the people who self-identify as vegetarian or vegan did better in the test. Now, funnily enough, a lot of people, I connect with a lot of what I call meatheads on the on LinkedIn, just because I like a bit of back and forth, and I like a bit of debate on the posts. And so
I see them in your comments.
Yes, indeed, yeah. And so there was a lot of them coming on, and the main thing that they seemed to be commenting was that this is correlative and it's not proof of causation, which to me was kind of strange, because I had never interpreted these as being you will become more intelligent if you go vegetarian or vegan. That's not what I ever thought of it. I always assumed that if anything, it's probably the opposite, right? If you have some level of intelligence which is largely genetic, and if you have a higher level of intelligence, you're more likely to go vegetarian or vegan. So I was kind of always thinking of it as the other way around. So the main bit of criticism that I was getting from the meatheads, I didn't really think was particularly relevant.
Yeah, I mean, that's so weird, because when it comes time to define intelligence, we don't agree on much, but we do agree that it is biological. It's genetics. You're born with a certain level of intelligence, and it's a constant in your life. There isn't much you can do about for increasing IQ points, or sometimes there's a decrease too, but it's marginal. So yeah, you can't become more intelligent by eating a vegan diet. That should be a given.
That's super interesting. Okay, I'd assumed there's probably some things that you could do to move it a little bit in either direction, but you're saying it's pretty marginal compared to basically a genetic baseline, hey?
Exactly. Yeah, you inherit that from your parents. That's a immutable trait, like your height or the color of your eyes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. So yeah, that main criticism, and I think a lot of the pro-meat people are used to and kind of programmed to make that criticism, because that's what they say to a lot of the health evidence that's shared, where vegetarians and vegans have lower risk of cancer and heart disease and overall mortality. And they like to say, well, this is associative, it doesn't prove causation, right? Which is true in a sense, but if you have a ton of epidemiological evidence showing that there's these associations with living longer basically and eating a plant-based diet, and then you have also some plausible mechanisms by which that happens with LDL cholesterol and stuff like this, and you do have some randomized studies where you see eating meat or eating plant-based meat instead of meat will lower LDL cholesterol and lower BMI and stuff like this over a relatively short period, it starts to build a pretty solid case that, okay, there probably is some causation going on here. So those are all things which, yeah, again, I think that the pro-meat people are kind of quite reflexively make that criticism. Oh, you can't prove causation from this. And in this case, of course, we're not saying that going vegan is going to make you smarter. You're more likely to go vegan if you are smarter. That's the claim. And someone said to me, well, in that case, what's the point? Like, why is this compelling? Why is this something worth sharing? And I said, well, I think it's like it ought to give people pause to think. If vegetarians and vegans tend to be smarter on average, maybe they've got a point. And the example I gave was to say that, if I read a study that said flat earthers have 10 IQ points more on average, I might well think maybe I should have another look at that flat earth stuff, right? Like, they seem to know what they're talking about. So those are the first two. And then the third study was really more likely showing causation in the other way, as we discussed, where children with higher IQ were more likely to grow up to be vegetarian. I think they were IQ tested at the age of 10, and then those with higher IQ were more likely to be vegetarian at the age of 30. So again, it's like, the intelligence causing the vegetarianism, veganism, not the other way around. So those were, in line with what I had kind of theorized about intelligence. And then I saw that other study about cognitive decline, which did seem to be saying that there's more something going in the other direction. I guess cognitive decline in older age is probably a bit of a special case, because clearly you are having some change in IQ, which presumably is influenced to some extent by environmental factors. And this was shared by somebody on LinkedIn just like a week after I had been doing my own IQ posting. And that did seem to suggest that basically plant-based diets have some sort of protective factor for against cognitive decline in old age. So it's possible that there is some sort of causation going in that direction, particularly when it comes to old age. But yeah, that was kind of a novel angle on it for me.
Well, I don't know, how much we can differentiate intelligence and certain cognitive functions like memory. I think it's expected that you will lose certain abilities growing up because of aging and also environmental factors. If you hit your head, or if you decide to make a career out of boxing, then
Right.
expect, to lose some cognitive abilities. But then does it affect your intelligence per se, like your intellectual potential? I don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah, interesting. And there's a bit of different types of intelligence and different types of cognitive functions that, from my understanding, they tend to correlate together, such that like higher IQ people will tend to have better memories, although they're distinct functions. I'm interested to hear more from you about like what you think of all of this as the intelligence expert here.
I mean, I'm not an intelligence expert, but I've read more about this topic than most people. And yeah, I think there are so many preconceived ideas around intelligence. The reason why that association I mentioned earlier, the Quebec Association for Giftedness, exists is because many people who are born gifted are not born with the psychosocial framework to manage their giftedness and their cognitive abilities. What do I mean by that? Well, I've seen so many cases of, let's say, school children getting bored out of their mind in the classroom and developing some behavioral issues from that. And so they can't follow what the teacher is saying because they are already, 10 steps ahead. And so they start doing other things. And then the teacher notices that behavior, doesn't know a thing about intelligence or giftedness, and so recommends the child to a psychologist who also doesn't know a thing about giftedness. And the child gets diagnosed as, ADHD or I've seen schizophrenia. I've seen dissociative disorder. There's a long list of false diagnoses that are put on gifted people, and it's damaging. They carry that their entire life, ignorant of their own self, and so yeah, there is that. I've seen so many cases of self-sabotaging. So you have school children who are trying to fit in, and in order to do that, they stop using big words. Um, uh, they put the wrong answers in exam questions because they don't want to be the child with always the A plus. They feel like that would ostracize them even more. In some schools, they will take the child and put that child in a higher grade, and that may be damaging to the development of that child, because all of a sudden you're within another age group. And so it is a struggle. It's an incredible struggle when you start getting into the nuances of what it feels like, and what is it like to be a person with a giftedness or higher intellectual potential. By the way, the definition for that, the clinical definition for that, is basically being, if you have like a curve and IQ distribution curve, the bottom 2.5% here in Quebec, Canada, the number that we have selected is 2.5%. In France, it's 5%, but 2.5% at the bottom are considered what we call, intellectual disabled people. It's an official diagnosis. They get support from the government, including financial support, to go through life. There are some institutions that screen for that. For instance, the army, you cannot you're not admitted in the army if you're considered intellectually disabled. But then there's the top of that curve, the top 2.5%, and that's what we consider being gifted, or having high intellectual potential. And that's where it gets tricky, because if you look at the difference between the bottom of that curve and the average IQ, it's the same difference as the average IQ and the top of that curve. And so you understand how those people live a bit in a different world, a bit in a different dimension. So they're very much part of that, what we call the neurodivergent spectrum. And so, yeah, I think society has the wrong reaction to intelligence. They think of it, when you say my child is gifted, you get some, bad looks from people around, because it feels like you're bragging about your child. You're not bragging. It's actually the cognitive reality of your child. Again, it's just like any other trait. Like, your child is tall, he's also gifted. He was born like that. We're also in a culture, Christian culture, where humility is really important value. And so talking about being gifted is not very popular. So it's not a very popular thing, to highlight the struggles of gifted people. But it's essential, because there are some theories that have been studied, and people have been writing about that since the 1800s, of how the average IQ in a society is the greatest indicator of the success of that society, of that country, how it is related to wealth production, of higher standards of living. And so you need to value the smartest people in your society, and give them a space where they can be themselves and not feel like doing self-sabotaging stuff and in order to fit in. And so, yeah, that's how I would summarize, the current state of intelligence and high intellectual potential. And so what got me interested, going back to the topic of vegetarianism and veganism, is you see so many of those outliners, like Einstein, Newton, Mary Shelley, and also I've seen people who were officially diagnosed as gifted in the community of that association and so on, being interested, or being vegetarian, being vegan, or being interested in that. And the reaction generally I get from those people is different from that of the average person, which is a reaction of openness to the idea of becoming vegan or vegetarian. Usually people are defensive, but those people have already thought of it and have considered becoming, and actually you don't need to argue with them because they feel that you're right. And so, yeah, it's easier to make the case for vegetarianism or veganism, like with that crowd.
That's so interesting. Yeah, there's so many. Wow, there's so much in there. I'm sure people listening will be pleased to know, people with all of their various mental health diagnoses will be pleased to know they're in fact just gifted.
That might be the case.
Yeah, that could well be the case. They're so interesting thinking about like the different mechanisms by which these things might be connected, because it feels kind of intuitive to me that there is a connection between high intelligence and being vegetarian or vegan. That seems like it makes sense. It maps onto the reality of what I see around me. Like all of the vegetarians and vegans I know tend to be pretty smart people. There's a little bit of selection effects. I work in the field, and so they're all professionals and stuff like that. But certainly, if I think of the stupidest people I know, there's a very low rate of vegetarianism and veganism amongst them. The openness thing is definitely something that's been proposed as a mechanism for that. Critical thinking also, where it's much easier to accept for you got to be careful with the polite ways to speak about this, but like average intelligence people, let's say, there's lots of signals that, well, everybody else eats meat and so it must be fine. Like that's kind of a mid-wit way of thinking about it, right? And that seems to be correct, and doesn't, like, you have to be a little bit smart to think, well, actually no, that doesn't follow, that's not how that works. Sensitivity also, somebody has proposed, like more intelligent people tend to be more sensitive, and more sensitive people to tend to be more empathetic, I guess, more likely to be vegetarian and vegan. So there's all of these potential like plausible mechanisms that connect the two. I've also heard it said that, I don't know how true this is, but higher intelligence people can actually be better at doing cognitive dissonance and motivated reasoning, because if I want to think of a reason why it's okay for me to eat meat, well, I can think of loads of them straight away because I'm smart, right? So there could be some things going in the other direction, but that's not like what you see reflected in the data, where you'd see all the intelligent people are less likely to be vegetarian. But yeah, there's all these things: openness, sensitivity, critical thinking, that appear to be ways that could happen, and does seem to happen.
Yeah, and we should say, being smarter doesn't mean that everything you do or say is smarter.
Yeah.
But the thing is, most smart ideas out there, innovations and so on, usually come from smarter people. That's a bit of adding some nuance to all of that. And yeah, the point about hypersensitivity, yes, definitely, it's a kind of a defining characteristic being having a higher intellectual potential is hypersensitivity, and that means a greater connection to the realities of other people around you, including animals. There's also a definition of intelligence as greater ability to adapt to different realities, conditions, environments. That's interesting. That means there's more flexibility for and more space for change in your life. It's not very rigid. You can definitely switch to a vegan diet, easily, than maybe a person with less of that intellectual, cognitive flexibility, adaptability.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. You'll be more able to actually deal with it and do the things that are necessary to live in a different way and stuff like that. One thing that I noticed on those posts, and like related to something that you said, a lot of people were very, I don't know if defensive is the right word, but critical of the idea that IQ or intelligence, well, let's say IQ, the idea that IQ is relevant or like maps onto anything that we care about. It seems to me kind of obvious that it would, right? You're going to tend to be able to have a higher income and have like pretty more able to maintain social relationships and stuff like this. Like, I would have thought that IQ is awfully well correlated with a lot of the different outcomes that we might care about, but a lot of people seem to contend that that's not the case. I don't know if that's just cope or what do you think of that?
I think it's a stupid idea. That's what I think. I think, as a baseline, SAT scores. I don't know if you have that in the UK, version of that, but academic success. Most exams in the academic field, are basically IQ tests. And if you do good in those exams, well, you get better grades and better chances in life because you have a higher degree. So just as a baseline, we can agree that that is a true, sign of success. If you're able to succeed in school and succeed in completing those little IQ tests, then you'll get better prospects in life. And then, there is a lot of pushback against the IQ tests, but there are also lots of myths around, IQ, and it's a whole history, and I think the IQ test has been misused in the past in so many contexts. There are qualified psychologists and neuropsychologists that specialize in giftedness and that can basically administer IQ tests to patients who might be gifted, and I think that's the best. If we want to talk about IQ tests, that's the best IQ test that we have out there. Those tests done under the supervision of those qualified professionals, health professionals. That's the golden standard. And then anything else, there is a subject for debate. Mensa has an IQ test. Mensa is this organization where I think you need a 130 IQ to get in or something like that. So they have an IQ test. Their members have to complete successfully in order to get in. But again, that's not a test done under the supervision of health professionals. That's not a test that was crafted by experts in the field. So there is skepticism around those kinds of IQ tests, and of course there are so many IQ tests in online that you can try for free. Now it has become common to um, administer IQ tests to potential employees, for potential job prospects. Again, I feel like that those kinds of tests are have no legitimacy to them. They're not a real indicator of intelligence. And intelligence is cannot be only captured by a test. It's also creativity. Um, how do you measure creativity in someone? Potential to um, imagine and be innovative. That's IQ tests are not designed for that. So, um, yeah, I would say some words of caution about IQ tests, but let's not, reject them completely.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see why people would I can see the motivation to be skeptical of it. Like, it's not a particularly comforting story, particularly if it is like largely genetic and there's not much you can do to change it. I can see why people would not want to believe that this is something that's going to be heavily correlated with all sorts of success in your life. But yeah, you mentioned about the school tests and the military tests and everything. Like, clearly, this is something that's considered by institutions to be of relevance. So yeah, I think I would be terribly surprised if IQ is not like important in a lot of things that we care about in life. But it's also kind of, I can see why it's fraught to talk about. I can see why it's like not politically correct to talk about like meat eaters having a lower IQ, for example.
I agree. And, the thing is, again, those preconceived notions about intelligence is just a trait um, well, it's more fundamental to your identity than height, because it's your cognitive structure, it's deeper than that. But, it's what are your priorities in life? Is it, do you want to be happy? Because being intelligent is not, a guarantee of happiness. Far from it. There's so many studies that show how smarter people get more depressed, more anxious, and the list goes on. So
Which also kind of
why?
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and even the flavor of depression that smarter people experience is one of the worst ones, which is existential depression.
Right.
how do you address existential depression? That's so hard not to crack. So yeah, it's just one other trait of your identity, and I think we put too much emphasis on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, that's interesting to mention because I've seen research talking about a link between vegetarianism and depression, and I think
Wow.
that is the likely mechanism. Right? It's not some. I don't think it's ever been proposed that is some sort of nutritional deficiency that makes you more likely to be depressed or something like that. It's more like, well, both of those things are correlated with higher intelligence or higher sensitivity. Yeah, if you have that kind of mind, you're more likely to be a vegetarian, and you're also more likely to be depressed, and that's like the link between those things, rather than anything else. Which people like to suggest all sorts of reasons why that might be, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, do you think that, bottom line, talking about uh, veganism and vegetarianism as something adopted by, you know, um, more intelligent people, do you think that harms the cause, or will get, more positive attention around the cause?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm open to it being either way on this. Somebody said to me, vegetarians and vegans already suffer a bit from their reputation of being holier than thou and high and mighty and stuff like this. And maybe this is not really something that, like, an idea that you want to be popularizing, which certainly could be true. I think from my perspective, the most likely effect, if there is one, and I think it's, probably pretty marginal, is this idea that, well, hang on a minute, if that's what the smart people are doing, maybe there's something to it, right? And like I said, if there was higher IQ amongst flat earthers, that might give people reason to think twice about that. So I think, to me, that seems like the most intuitive thing. If there's kind of any pattern of beliefs that are associated with people of higher IQ, I would think that's worth having a look at. But yeah, who knows on like aggregate, is this just something that will upset people more and, you know, make people dislike vegetarians and vegans more? Well, it's worth saying as well, I think that people can put too much stock in what makes vegetarians or vegans more likable. Like, certainly that's relevant to some degree. You do want to be the type of person that people want to be like, I suppose, is how that translates onto kind of advocacy. But I really think that people can do that too much to the detriment of other things. Like, if you're encouraging people to look at factory farming and slaughterhouse footage, people don't like that, and people won't really appreciate if you hold that up to them while they're eating their dinner. But that will make them more likely to go vegetarian or vegan if they are forced to look at it. So, you know, likability for if you're vegetarian or vegan can only get you so far, I think. And, you know, there's people, it's nice to be liked, right? People like to be liked, and people, it's nice to be nice and stuff like this. I think that especially probably vegetarians and vegans tend to be, I actually haven't looked at data on this, but I imagine more agreeable and more like, you know, wanting to have peaceful interactions and stuff like this. So I actually don't think that it comes very naturally to the type of person who goes vegetarian or vegan to do the confrontational kind of activism, for example. And certainly it doesn't probably make you more likable, but I do think that it's a good thing from the perspective of animals. And so, yeah, I think it's, if I had to bet, and again, I'm kind of guessing here, if I had to bet, it would be a similar thing on pointing out that vegetarians and vegans tend to be more intelligent. That it may not make you the most popular person in the room to say that, but it might well be giving people pause for thought and thinking maybe that's something I ought to think about more.
Interesting, because I know that the other side, you know, big ag or pro meat people, they often use intelligence as an argument to promote meat eating, and they use it to disparage basically becoming vegan or vegetarian. They talk about eating plants as, you know, a trigger for reduced cognitive abilities. The Jordan Peterson of this world talk literally about brain shrinking. You know, I've heard that a lot. So they are using intelligence against us. So why not, you know, fight fire with fire?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, so I actually haven't heard too much of that version. I've heard people say, you know, eating meat enabled us to evolve our brains and stuff like that, which, okay, that's not going to be that relevant for today's context, or like on an individual level, is this going to make you more intelligent or something? People often try to make that inference, but yeah, it only works on stupid people, I guess. But yeah, I think I agree with the spirit of what you're saying. There's definitely all sorts of things in this category where the idea is tell vegetarians and vegans, shut up about that. And we know that we can kind of get you to shut up about it if we give you the idea that it will be bad and hurt vegetarian and veganism, right? People say, oh, if you show me the slaughterhouse, I'm going to eat more meat. It's like, are you really going? Presumably you're eating as much meat as you want to eat. Are you going to now eat more meat than you wanted to eat because a vegan upset you? Like, probably not, right? So I think that more often than not, those kind of like hypothetical dangers of bringing up ostensibly pro-vegetarian or vegan talking points are just that, like efforts to put you off from talking about it. I've seen a bunch of evidence that looking at slaughterhouse and factory farming footage makes people more likely to go vegetarian or vegan. Like it seems too obvious to say, and yet it's like not a rare idea that actually that's going to make people dig in and give people cognitive dissonance, and they're going to be more likely to eat more meat and stuff like this. Like that's just bollocks. And that is exactly what I would say if I was trying to get vegetarians and vegans to shut up about that, because I don't want them to say that, because I want my meat company to sell more meat, for example. So I always try and think about like what would the other side do, what the other side's saying, exactly as you mentioned. And yeah, I think it's too easy sometimes to put off vegetarians and vegans from doing the thing that is very effective by kind of just lying and saying that it's not effective or that it's counterproductive.
That's such a relevant point, because we behave too much as if the enemy, so to speak, is inactive, is passive, completely passive, and is not listening. Like I've had a discussion with a guest once. Like I feel torn about having those all of those great animal rights activists on my podcast, including you, to discuss animal rights activism, because I know that Big Ag might be listening to all of those conversations and taking notes, as they should be doing.
Yeah.
And so am I helping the enemy by putting everything, on public display? Am I doing more wrong than good?
I don't think so. I think certainly once you get to a certain size of audience, it's sensible to assume that the enemy is listening to anything that you're doing publicly. There ought to be a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily say publicly that is useful for us to know inside the animal movement, but that we wouldn't publicize or like want to make a headline out of, for example. But you'd hope that your guests are kind of exercising some discretion and not saying those things publicly. But yeah, I think they're certainly, they ought to be listening. If they're not, right, it would make sense. It's going to be maximize their goals. But that said, I think that there are some things that are worth communicating anyway. And yeah, we're speaking more to the people on our side, and we're speaking in mind with that the enemy might be listening, but we can't let that stop us from speaking to each other at all publicly. There's a bunch of stuff that's useful for us to say publicly and useful for us to promote and pay for posters and get the message out as far as we can. Then there's a smaller set of stuff that's useful for us to say to each other in private, but not on a live stream. So yeah, then there's stuff that you should probably keep between yourself and your God, I suppose.
Well, that reminds me of the Animal Liberation Front press office, North American press office. If you visit their website, they have a whole section dedicated to online privacy and how to stop some prying party from stealing data from you, or surveilling you, or spying on what you're doing. And I haven't found that anywhere else. Those steps we could take of cybersecurity, for instance, to just protect ourselves against the big ag hackers out there who might be interested in our data, what we're sharing in our group conversations, and all of that. So maybe that's something we should put in place more widely in the movement.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's prudent to assume, like in vegan Discord servers and stuff like that, for example, be aware that the enemy might be listening. I've always considered that it would be a great honor to be on some sort of list, some sort of hit list for the animal ag industry. Right? If I start seeing cars with blacked out windows parked down my street, I'll go, good, I'm upsetting the right people, right? But yeah, that's I haven't got to the level yet, I don't think, where security is a concern like that. But I'm guessing that it must be for some of the top guys, some of the Gary Orofskys and Earthling Eds and stuff like that. They must be. It's prudent to take some amount of security concerns, right? Because again, our enemy is killers, right? We know that. I don't, if one side was going to be more likely to just flat out murder the other, right? It's not going to be the peaceful vegans doing that, is it? So, yeah. Hopefully, I'll get to the stage where that becomes a concern. That'll be an honor.
Well, I've asked that once to Dr. Crystal Heat, who is behind Our Honor, and yeah, she said, I'm scared. I'm scared of getting attacked or followed or assassinated or something. I'm reading right now the autobiography of Gail. Sorry, I'm forgetting her last name. She was an undercover investigator for so many years. She wrote the book Slaughterhouses, and she mentioned how in many occasions she was scared for her life. Some slaughterhouse owner would find an opportunity to kidnap her or something. So yeah, those are concerns in our movement, definitely. And there are, of course, instances of assassinations and kidnappings and so on that were documented, that happened to some activists. Reagan something from Canada more recently was rolled over by a trucker who was transporting, I think, pigs. The guy did not go to prison for that.
Right.
I don't think so. So, yeah.
I don't know too much about that. I assume that was more of an accident than an assassination, right?
Yes, you're right that, it is an accident. It was an accident, but was it really?
Well, yeah.
I mean, she was in the middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that makes you wonder.
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of things to say on that. One is that I think it would be a great shame if people were to not speak up for fear of this kind of stuff. And sort of self-censor for the remote possibility that there could be, the wrong person from Animal Ag trying to get your address or whatever else. I think that the other side would love that, and they would probably not throw too much cold water on the idea that that was a deliberate murder, for example, because they might think it's going to benefit us if vegans think that we might bloody murder them, right? And then they'll shut up a bit. So probably they wouldn't mind that idea being out there. And of course, it would be a great shame to have people self-censoring for fear of that kind of thing. For me, I think I would. What's the thing? I'd rather live on my feet than die on my knees. That kind of thing, right? Where I don't think there's any. I think the threats would have to get pretty severe before I would even curtail at all what I talk about. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, it's pretty. If you try to think about what, occupy the mind of somebody who wants to do something nefarious to someone on the other side, right? Maybe if we were to hatch a plan to go and get Mr. Tyson or whatever, right, one of the top dogs. We would probably quite quickly find that it's not really worth us going down that road at all, because we're going to take immense legal risk for some pretty marginal benefit, really. Like if you were to take out the top guy, there's going to be another top guy waiting, right? It's not going to be anyone. The incentives are not aligned for anyone, even if they're paid and work for one of these companies. Why do I want to take the risk to go and kill some activist that like is having a negative impact on my industry broadly, like why am I going to be the one to go and take that risk, right? It's not. It's almost like a tragedy of the commons thing, right? Like let someone else do that, right? It's affecting us all. Why should I take the legal risk? So I don't think that, realistically, it is quite difficult, and it's fortunate this is the case. It's quite difficult in a developed society to actually be doing anything that illegal or nefarious. Now, they do lots of nefarious stuff within the bounds of the law about spreading disinformation and lobbying and all this kind of stuff that, anyone would say on reflection, this is bad, but it's very carefully done within the bounds of the law, and so that there's no legal risk for these people to take, basically. So yeah, I would be surprised if it would be worth any paid hitman or anyone paying a hitman to do this kind of thing for activists. There are some other things that we might be concerned about. Like, I think that there probably are saboteurs and like undercover, like fake animal welfare activists or fake, animal activists. And one thing I like to think about that is, if you were going to go to the vegan conference or be in the vegan community and be trying to disrupt and create bad outcomes for veganism or create good outcomes for animal ag, what might be the ways that you would do that? Now, you'd have to be subtle. You have to avoid detection. So you can't just say, "Hey, everyone, let's forget about veganism, right? Let's, what about farming, right?" You can't be. You'd have to be subtle. You'd have to do things that could conceivably be something that a vegan might say or think, but that would in fact be bad for veganism, bad for animals, good for the industry. I think like one example of that is anti-welfarism, for example. I don't know if you have particular views on that, but I think that, it's quite easy seemingly to have a lot of vegans saying, "Oh, well, bollocks to any sort of welfare reforms or like cage-free commitments or anything like that, because it's still bad. The animals are still being exploited, and we should basically be against this." And it's actually quite easy to whip up a decent part of the animal movement to being extremely counterproductively like opposed to welfare reforms, which are going to be expensive for the industry to implement and put up the price of animal products and make plant-based products more competitive, right? So that's something that you could do. Another one is this idea about like saying it's bad to show slaughterhouse footage. That's not going to make people go vegan, stuff like that. Like, there seems to be a decent amount of, I don't know, people like to think that things are more counterintuitive than they are sometimes. Oh, you would think this is helpful, but it's actually, no, it is helpful. It is helpful. So, and there's a couple of others I could think of as well that are like, plausibly a vegan would say this, but it's actually very counterproductive. And the thing is, if you come across these ideas, if you find people who are like anti-welfarism, for example, the chances are they're not a saboteur. The chances are they are probably an earnest vegan who has the wrong ideas. And of course, if you were a saboteur and you're doing your job right, there should be 20 times more earnest vegans who you manage to persuade and repeat the ideas, right? Plant-based meats are processed. That's another one that a lot of vegans are fond of saying. Plant-based meats are ultra-processed foods. That's like a hobby horse of mine, where, yes, okay, they're in this category called ultra-processed foods. They're also healthier than meat. That's the main thing that we should all be saying. Plant-based meats are healthier than meat. And there's a lot of evidence on that point now. So yeah, there's a few of these ideas around that are unhelpful, but plausibly something that a vegan might say, and I think are disruptive, and I think can be cause for division and stuff like this. But yeah, that's what I would do if I was a meat industry saboteur.
Well, on that, on the website of the ALF press office, the North American press office, they actually have another section called, I think, snitches something, just exposing the many FBI agents that went undercover to infiltrate ALF cells. Now, that's interesting. The whole conversation about sabotaging this movement is incredibly interesting. Um, I think at the very least, we should have some strong cybersecurity um, uh, rules, standards put in place. Like, have you read about the construction of, I think, the African Union headquarters? I think they're based in South Africa. South Africa, I'm not sure, but it was built by a Chinese company, and the members of that union, of that assembly political institution, have found at some point mics inside the walls, um, potentially coming from Chinese spies. So when they built the building, they added mics everywhere behind the walls. And I would be just terrified to think that Mercy for Animals or PETA or whatever organization is being listened to by big ad PR agencies or whatever organization exists out there. And so I think that at the very least, we should just, make sure that our cybersecurity measures are in line with industry standards.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I haven't heard of that case, but yeah, that makes sense. Countries do be spying. Yeah, so I guess that's something that happens. And I mean, I like to put my conspiracy hat on and think about there could well be plants within animal organizations. That, again, this is something that would totally make sense to do if you're the president of Tyson or whatever, right? Like big meat. It would totally make sense. You want to like plant people within organizations, and I think the key thing is the ideas. And that's why it's so important to have clear thinking on what ideas are helpful for animals and what ideas are not helpful for animals, because the way that you would do it, I think, is just to try to infiltrate with bad ideas, try to get the animal movement to misspend its resources, right? They've got a limited amount of resources. Let's get them all thinking that this is like some really impactful thing to do, and so that they waste their resources on that. That would be a great strategy if you're the animal industry. Promote, like, putting them off the ideas that are helpful, deliberately holding up organizations. Like there's I really should read about this. I'm sure there's resources on like what a spy would do, what a saboteur would do. We can be on the lookout for.
Well, yeah, I mean that is it reminds me of the Three Body Problem book series. The aliens are listening. Kind of a tricky situation, and I want to add something about the danger aspect of being in this movement. I do believe that it's rare, that you're attacked or something like that, but I think it's also context dependent. If we're talking about ecologists in Brazil opposing ranchers, then you're going to get murdered. I'm sorry, but there are like thousands of them that have been found assassinated with their entire family. It's horrible. So if you're an undercover investigator, you should be careful. Again, it's riskier, but if you're just on social media or attending a protest or doing some more safer stuff, I think you can just be effective at that, make an impact, and still make sure to be safe in a safer context. I want to. How much time do we have left?
All the time in the world, mate. I've got nothing but time. I'm going to carry on streaming probably after we finish speaking. So yeah, we can go as long as you've got time.
Well, let me bring back the conversation to intelligence. Another aspect of it is how so many people have titles, like special titles, PhD and stuff, and use that as a way to discredit this movement. I'm a medical doctor at this institution, and I'm here to tell you that eating plants is really bad for you for this and that reason. And I think it's another way of using intelligence against this movement, finding the intelligent people out there and making them say that veganism is silly and bad and the animal cause is stupid. So yeah, what do you make of that?
Yeah, there's definitely a phenomenon that you've seen. We've watched a couple of debates from Sean Baker, who's an MD and a carnivore, and there's that Paul Saladino guy as well, who's also an MD and I guess quit being a carnivore because he had health problems. Jordan Peterson, you could put to another example of this, like in the Metasphere, who I believe also has health problems from being carnivore. So yeah, I mean, their credentials. I mean, it is true what you're saying. Like, and that's why I have PhD in my YouTube channel name. It's like gives you a bit of credibility, doesn't it? It makes people listen to what you're saying a bit more. So it's really interesting because it seems obvious to me as a person who is doing that doesn't necessarily mean I'm right about any given thing. Like I could totally be wrong about some of the stuff that I'm saying. I have frequently discovered things in which I'm wrong through doing this. And actually, maybe I have the same thing with the vegan report. Like it's quite good having these conversations in public. Sometimes the critical comments are the most useful because you think, oh yeah, I didn't think I've been saying this thing. And now, right, if you're only saying in private conversations, it's quite rare that someone's going to say to you in the conversation, no, you're wrong about this. But if you have a comment section, people can say that, and sometimes it's useful. Oftentimes it's not, but sometimes it's useful, right? But yeah, there's definitely the phenomenon of like borrowed credibility being weaponized against the animal movement. And I don't know how much of that is orchestrated and bought and paid for by the industries. Again, I would think that it's something worth them doing. Like if they don't have Paul Saladino on their payroll, they probably should, right? It would seem well worth investing like the cost of a few PhDs or MDs to repeat their propaganda. And so, yeah, I think that's certainly something that you see. But yeah, I think, coming from somebody who does this to some extent, it's just obvious that doesn't mean that they're right. So I think that's something to really keep in mind with that. I think, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that really, but yeah, I think clearly having those credentials is no guarantee of being correct.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not necessarily correlated with higher intellectual potential. There is a rule of thumbs in psychology. I'm not sure how solid that is in terms of data and evidence and studies, but it says that 1/3 of high intellectual potential people do great in academics. They become high achiever. The other third are leave school and become entrepreneurs and go on, being successful at whatever independent lane they have chosen. And the last, chunk of gifted people end up homeless and yeah, basically failing at life in the most tragic ways possible. And so, yeah, it doesn't mean being very smart doesn't mean that you're going to be great at school. Maybe school is not the right institution for you, and I have many problems with school, but just think about the quality of the schooling you get. Maybe you're very smart, but you live in an area where school education it's very low quality, and so it's not very stimulating. what if the structure of schools itself, is not a match with your personality? It's too authoritative, too hierarchical, too rigid, to allow you to truly, blossom. So school itself, and diplomas, I don't think it's, we give too much importance to that. And with AI and everything that's happening, I think it's losing a lot of importance. Like colleges have lost lots of uh, you know importance in society and legitimacy. I feel like, because so many people are succeeding without college degrees, and um, also so many people with college degrees are making a fool of themselves publicly. And so, yeah, it's people should be aware of them, should be cautious.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing I would say on the borrowed credentials point, you can find an expert to take any opinion, basically, right? And the existence of one or two carnivore MDs, that doesn't really tell you anything about their tendency to follow that lifestyle, right? It could well be the case that there's a correlation between higher educational achievements and more plant-based diet, but somebody has been motivated, and well, on the nefarious level, maybe some organization has paid Sean Baker and the others to be like doing the propaganda, but also just on it's demand led, right? If there's like consumer demand for a doctor to say, hey, you can eat loads of meat and there's no problem, which clearly there is demand for that, then some idiot will rise up and start saying it and using their credentials for that. So yeah, I think if you can point to particular examples of someone with a PhD who says it's okay to eat meat, that doesn't really tell you anything about the tendency on general. If you were to use that as a proxy, like all of the evidence that I've looked at, we do a ton of surveys where we ask about diets and also educational attainment, and consistently you see higher percentage of vegetarians and vegans amongst those with more advanced degrees, and lower percentage amongst those who are like, some high school level. So yeah, I think that it's like that's what they mean by the exception that proves the rule, I suppose.
And I should mention an organization. They're called, let me just confirm the name, Changing Markets.
Mm-hmm.
They have released a few reports, and I think they have confirmed that Sean Baker's and his gang of meatheads are on the payroll of Big Ag. Yeah, it's incredibly interesting read, those reports. I've welcomed on the show the person that works on that focus. You should invite her on your show. But yeah, it's very interesting. And I wish we had like animal rights organizations doing that type of investigative work, not just environmental organizations like Changing Markets are. Their concern is the environment less than animal welfare. Another
thing on that,
yeah.
sorry, just while we're on the point of the borrow credentials, it's very easy to say things when you're not being challenged. It's very easy to speak to whatever kind of agenda that you want to try and promote. So I have a Google sheet of meat industry professionals who have refused to debate, and a couple of names from that Changing Market reports that you mentioned. Frederick Leroy, he's a big purveyor of misinformation on meat and the environment. Frank Mitloner as well is a guy at UC Davis who does the GWP star, like some made up metrics so that they can say that cows are not that bad for the environment. And I've challenged these people, like, let's have a conversation about it, let's have a debate. And they don't want to do it. They run away because they know that actually if you're in a conversation where somebody can point out the flaws in what you're saying and hold your feet to the fire and like force you to make sense, then it's not so easy just to kind of say your talking points and leave it at that. And I searched the other day on YouTube for Frank Mitloehner debate, and there aren't any. He hasn't done any debates. And if you search for Frederick Leroy debate, he's done one in which he against a lady called Irina Herson, in which he ends up giving at least two major concessions that are never things that he would want to say when he's just on his own talking to his audience on Twitter or whatever. Like, she got him to say, we do need to reduce the scale of livestock production, which he must have ended that debate and go, oh my God, I can't believe she made me say that. Like, he's never done debate before or since, as far as I can tell. I actually have a website which is, let me screen share this with you real quick. I have up your Map Your Health website here, but I just wanted to show as well. Whoops. Let me go back here. That's what I want to do. This is my website for how long has Frederick Leroy avoided chrisbryant.com.
That's so funny.
So there you go. There's my counter since I first asked him to debate in November 2024. And he's now blocked me on LinkedIn. And yeah, this will probably count up to infinity now. My one regret with this website is that I could have got 3 years of this domain at a discounted rate, but I only bought 1 year and now I'm paying the yearly rate. So there you go. We live and learn, I suppose.
Well, I don't know how you would debate him, because you don't agree on the facts. You're living in alternate realities. So how can you debate someone who, is disconnected from reality?
Well, the trick is, so this is a lot of the pro-meat stuff, a lot of the carnivore stuff. It's all the same kind of trick. You have a narrowly constructed sentence which is technically true, but ignores all of the context of what is actually important. So, to give an example from Frederick Leroy, he wrote a document called the Dublin Declaration, which is like a very misleading document in defense of meat, and they've published it in a journal, and they take it and do their lobbying with it, and so on. And they have a few great phrases in there which are good examples of this. They have a phrase in there that says, animal products are a source of essential nutrients. And you read that in isolation, you think, well, okay, that probably means we have to eat animal products. Then they're not saying animal products are an essential source of nutrients. They're a source of essential nutrients. They have nutrients in them, and some of those nutrients are essential nutrients. It's not. They're not actually saying you need to eat animal products to be healthy, but that's kind of what people are reading, right? And they know that. So animal products are a source of essential nutrients. And if you don't have anyone sitting opposite you to push back and say, well, yeah, that's true, but that's not really relevant. Like, you don't need animal products to get those nutrients. The gravel on my driveway is a source of essential nutrients because it's got iron and zinc in it, right? It's like, it's such a stupid thing to think of. Another one that I came across a bunch of these when I was researching for a carnivore debate that I did recently. One of their sort of narrow, we should come up with a phrase for this, like something that's narrowly true, but it implies something that is not true. Fiber is not an essential nutrient. Now, again, that's narrowly true in the food science definition of an essential nutrient is something that we can't synthesize in our bodies, and there's a specific deficiency for not having enough of it. And fiber, there's not a specific deficiency disease for fiber deficiency. So fiber is not an essential nutrient. And that makes you think, wow, we don't need to be consuming fiber. It's also true that not consuming enough fiber is going to massively increase your risk of getting cancer. So it's like true in isolation. And like plants contain toxins. This is another one that was big, like phrase that they like to say. They have these like bits of language on the hard drive, like just these very narrowly true sentences, which don't mean what they think it means. Or in the case of someone like Frederick Leroy, this is the difference between disinformation and misinformation, right? There's the disinformation, people like Frederick Leroy, he knows what he's doing. He knows he's being misleading when he writes that. And that's disinformation. He's created this meme now, which other people are going to believe and repeat uncritically. And then the misinformation is the people who are repeating it uncritically, and they don't really know, they don't really understand. Okay, fiber is not an essential nutrient, but it still, that doesn't mean that it's not healthy to eat it, and it's going to increase your risk of a bunch of diseases if you don't have enough fiber. So yeah, there's these things which are like narrowly true, but it's so simple. It's just they're one question away from collapsing on it by just saying like, oh, okay, so does that mean that we need to eat animal products to be healthy? Well, no, actually, that doesn't mean that. That's not the case. Livestock systems can provide ecological services. That's another phrase that they have. Well, that makes you think, oh wow, it's really important to have livestock. There's this intuitive thing about like symbiotic relationship with the animals and the plants and stuff like that. Livestock can provide ecological services. Again, that's true in a narrow sense, but there are no livestock production systems which are like net carbon negative, for example. They're providing some narrow services, but they're providing much more harms over here. And it's not the case that we need livestock in these systems. Like there's all sorts of these silly things which are narrowly true sentences, and they craft them and present them in a certain way to give a certain picture of the world, but it's just completely false if you scratch at it and ask like a very simple question to them.
They're all sneaky lawyers. It's interesting. Well, that kind of stuff, I would not expect like gifted people or people with a higher IQ to fall for that. There are so many survivors of cults that have started podcasts or doing conferences, and they always say intelligence is not a guarantee of being protected against a cult or against fraud and all of that. And I would push against that. I think yes, I agree with them, but I think that higher intelligence is actually a form of protection against those forms of manipulation. And one argument for that is, well, there are studies showing that people with a higher IQ tend to be less religious. They are kind of unable to enter into dogmatic thinking and adhere to some strong dogmas and groupthink. So yeah, and that's another relation to this movement. Most vegans out there, vegetarians, I think, would consider themselves as non-religious, and so maybe that has to do with intelligence again.
Yeah, I've seen evidence on that point. So a higher proportion of atheists or agnostics amongst vegetarians and vegans compared to the general population. And yeah, again, it's going to be, and you do see some religious justifications of meat eating, of course. The guy I debated a couple of weeks ago we didn't get on to talking about this in the debate, but some of his views are around meat as a blessed food in the Bible and stuff like this, which honestly I don't really even know how to engage with that, because it would require a whole other conversation about religion. Like I'm not gonna persuade him out of being religious, presumably. But yeah, it's just one of the many things that is not getting you to the conclusion that you think is getting you to.
Don't get me started on that, because that's what I'm doing right now. Faith-based activism, and I think that's a lane that's such an unexplored lane. We have so much work to do with religious communities, and we're not able to connect with them, I think, because of that, because we are mostly non-religious. And so it's difficult to ask a vegan to go and advocate for veganism to a priest when they don't even believe in God. Like, when the vegan doesn't even believe in God. So there needs to be some common ground in order to establish communication and then try convincing that religious institution or religious leader to make positive changes. To finish our discussion, I want to talk about the link. I want to talk about animals and the link between intelligence and animals. That's an argument we often hear that animals are not intelligent, and that justifies all the harm and exploitation that is done against them. I would love to hear your thoughts about that, and also about how that hypersensitivity aspect and that capability of adapting to different environments and people helps high IQ people, gifted people, to better connect with animals, to understand them better, to be able to establish a relationship, an actual relationship with animals, when other people will only see a toy, even if they have like an emotional connection with that toy. It's just a toy at the end, and are not able to perceive so much the personhood of that creature. When I've noticed, I don't think there have been any studies on that, but from personal experience, so many gifted people just are invested so deeply in the relationship or the perception of animals and of cruelty against animals. It touches them deeply. So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, there's really interesting couple of thoughts on that. I used to speak to this guy who goes by Ask Yourself on YouTube, and I don't know if you've come across this person. He has he's sort of YouTube famous for an argument that he calls Name the Trait. And the challenge to the meat eater is to name the trait that makes it acceptable to name the trait that is absent in animals, that if absent in humans would make it acceptable to kill humans for food, right? And I think intelligence is probably the most common answer that people first give to that. And then, of course, the reply, the entailment of that is like, if you have a human with the same level of intelligence as a cow, for example, and like there are intellectually disabled people to whom that might apply, do you find it acceptable to kill them for food? And of course, everyone says, well, no. And then, okay, well, it can't be that intelligence is the trait, right? And so, you go around again, and people come up with different things, and they say all sorts of things, ability to form civilizations and language and stuff like this. And you can say, okay, if you have a person who can't speak, right? Okay, no, it's not acceptable to kill them. But yeah, intelligence seems to be like the level one answer that people give to that. That's kind of the intuitive thing that people think, oh yeah, it's because we're more intelligent. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. only a meat eater would think that that's a valid thing to say, right?
Well, we were cannibals a minute ago. In
Right.
human history, that was not like a shocking idea. Eating your neighbor, there were rituals around it. There was a whole, community spirit, built around eating your neighbor. So, yeah, the intelligence is certainly not the trait that stops us from eating someone.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so there's all sorts of I don't know. There's all sorts of things that could be said about that, and of course, there's presumably more and less intelligent animals in the animal kingdom, and people don't seem to make much differentiation on that. Now, some people might say, okay, you don't want to eat dolphins or monkeys because they're too close to us in terms of intelligence. But yeah, I think many people would be surprised by the cognitive abilities that actually are demonstrated by a lot of the animals that we do eat, like the problem-solving capacities of chickens, or the emotional relationships and friendships of cows, the very blatant similarity of pigs to dogs, who we love. So, yeah, I think that there's all sorts of dissonance and confused thinking going on there when it comes to thinking about the intelligence of animals. It's also occurred to me before that we kind of assume that humans are the most intelligent animals, but there are animals with much bigger brains that just don't have opposable thumbs. Like whales have brains like the size of a double-decker bus, but they live underwater, so like they can't have computers. So do you know what I mean? Like that's all there is to it. Elephants have bigger brains than humans as well, but they got these big flat hooves, so like they can't type anything out, right? Like
Definitely.
who says that we're the most intelligent animal?
Yeah, and who is qualified to, discern and understand what uh, higher intelligence means? It's like, um, what kind of measures are we going to put in place in order to define that higher intelligence, and who is qualified to, make that assessment? You need basically what I'm saying is you need to be smart or as smart or smarter to decide that your fellow person is, of that intelligence or lower.
Yeah, for sure. And then I like what you said about the hypersensitivity. It almost feels like more imagination seems like too loose a word for it, but like you can simulate what it might be like to be in the consciousness of another type of animal. Like when I think a lot of people have this probably intuitively with their dog, right? Oh, he's hungry or he's bored or whatever, he's scared. So a lot of people have that on some basic level, but like to really spend a minute like inhabiting that and imagining it at length, and say, like, for example, a pig who is in a farrowing crate and can't turn around for weeks and weeks at a time. Like, what was I doing 8 weeks ago? I can't even remember. It's such a long time to be trapped in that situation, and it just goes on and on and on. Like I might stream for another hour now, then go have some food, and then blah, blah, blah. Like, there's so much that I'm going to do in the amount of time that this animal is just there in the cage, just trapped. It really, you need a bit of imagination or just willingness to stick with that thought, I guess, to properly simulate anything like what it might be like to be in that kind of situation. So yeah, I think I imagine that low intelligence is probably also correlated with selfishness, where it's just like, I've only really got the capacity to think about my needs, and I'm hungry right now, and I'm late for whatever, right? But like, yeah, thinking about the experience of others and what that must be like for them, let alone like, thinking about how our actions impact on the abilities of others and stuff like this. A lot of this seems like quite basic, though you might tell your young child, but many adults don't seem to have ever had that lesson.
Yeah, I agree. You need some cognitive power to be able to, give life to that kind of scenario, to that kind of story. And that's why another, defining trait of higher intelligence is, again, creativity, innovation. Most innovation comes from that 2.5% at the top of the IQ curve. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing to consider. We depend so much on that crowd of people for humanity's progress. Yeah, it's stunning. Chris, I'll just, I would love to talk about Map Your Health,
Yes, we didn't get to Map Your Health and the Dharma stuff that you're doing as well.
Yeah. I mean, of course. Do you want to start with Map Your Health?
Yeah, let's do. I can screen share the website here so that you can talk to us about it. Oh, here we go.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, well, basically, this is the waiting list. This is the web page to sign up to the waiting list for Map Your Health. And this is the web version of Map Your Health. Now, it needs some updates,
Okay.
including data updates. Some of them will happen actually tonight and in the following days. So uh, a lot will happen on that front. Um, but yeah, so basically the concept is to track and monitor environmental health risks in your surroundings. That includes virus outbreaks, that also includes pollutants emitted by your local industries, the quality of your tap water, the quality of your air, and so many other aspects of environmental health. I think that we put lots of emphasis, and for the right reasons, on physical health, staying fit, on diet, very important too. But on mental health, another important one. But what about environmental health? That's our blind spot. Yet it is such a big player in our health, big factor in influencing how long we're going to live and what kind of quality of life we're going to enjoy. And so, yeah, this is the first and only tool to offer that kind of information that exists. So, very excited about this project. And to connect it maybe with animal rights, as some of the listeners know, factory farming is linked to lots of detrimental effects on our health. Usually we talk about, cancers and diabetes and other chronic illnesses, but what about public health? What about zoonotic diseases? What about, um, uh, resistance to antibiotics? This is just as much important, if not more, than those chronic illnesses that develop at the later stage of life. And I think we need a tool to let people know that there are factory farms and slaughterhouses around them, and that those places are actively impacting their health and their quality of life. And so, yeah, that's basically the concept of Map Your Health.
Nice, that's super useful. And yeah, we've done a project before where we've looked at evidence on negative health outcomes associated with living near to factory farms. Essentially, a lot of it is ammonia pollution, right? And that has an effect on people with asthma and COPD, like a lot of respiratory conditions that can get a lot worse if you're living near to a factory farm with all of the air pollution coming from that. So yeah, I tried typing a couple of places in the UK, but it didn't come up. But do you have any areas that are online for this, or this is waiting for the update?
This is waiting for the update. So
Okay, nice.
basically, you subscribe to the waiting list for the app, which is the final version of this. But yeah, I have a web version available that is going to be updated with more locations and more data points than it currently has. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, nice. Well, we'll look out for that. That's mapyourhealth.info if people want to check that out. I'll put that in the chat as well, so people can sign up for the waiting list. And yeah, hopefully this is going to be something that brings to light, a lot of the negative health impacts of living close to factory farms, basically.
Yes, and I think we are ill prepared for the next pandemic, which is going to happen. Like people are in denial, but there's a big one coming at some point. Could be 10 years, 20 years, hopefully 50, 100 years, but it's coming sooner than later, sadly. and we need to be prepared for that. And we're not ready. I think that COVID-19 was a disaster
Yeah.
in terms of communication, of risk communication from authorities, from media outlets. That was a complete circus, and we played a lot with people's lives because of political agendas and all sorts of private interests and so on. And yeah, I think we need a tool, an independent platform to communicate truthfully, rightfully, and in real time those kinds of environmental health risks.
Yeah. Do you ever worry, like speaking about intelligence? Because I mean, it seems to be, if you look at social media, you would be forgiven for thinking that the vaccine was a disaster and that the vaccine didn't really work and it gave people health problems and all this kind of stuff. The COVID vaccine did work. It does work. Like it reduced rate of COVID transmission. It ultimately enabled many of our societies to open back up. Like, if you look on social media, you think that the opposite's the case. It's crazy. Do you ever worry? And now, I've just been reading in my, well, I suppose in my country, broadly in the UK, I was going to say my local area, like anti-vax is on the rise more, and people, like, there's a lot of kids in the schools getting measles now. Like, we've had a vaccine for this for ages. It's been near universal coverage, and now people are suspicious about vaccines again, and so vaccine coverage is going down, and now there's measles outbreaks in schools. It's like, do you ever worry that there are some things where we are kind of at the mercy of stupid people?
Oh yes, all the time. I think one of my favorite critique of politics and society is the movie Idiocracy.
Yes, yeah.
It's so funny, but it's such a reflection of reality. And actually, worldwide, we have a lowering of average IQs across, the US, Canada, and so on. So people
Really?
are yes, they are getting dumber.
Oh no. That's not good news, is it? That's not good news.
And it's worrying because if higher IQs are correlated or cause greater production of wealth and better living standards, then that means we're looking at such a bleak future ahead. I think it's not only about intelligence, it's about distrust of authorities. I think that people witnessed a lot of dumb things happening from authorities, bad policies, bad communication around COVID-19, and that has caused a lot of distrust from the population. And that distrust is like cancer spreading to different areas of healthcare, including then vaccines. If they lied, if they were stupid enough to say this, if they lied about that, then maybe they also lied about the vaccines. They also lied about those more fundamental stuff. And so I think it's a natural instinct from people to become distrustful of authority. But yeah, I blame the politicians. I think our politicians are so stupid, truly are. That pandemic happened and they just were not thinking long term. They don't have they think about their career, they think about their next campaign, they think about outside perspective and how to have great positive public relations, but they don't think about civilization. They don't think about existential threats and how to go forward as a society in 10, 50, 100 years. They're trapped in that ego mindset and those very small political calculations, and that does a big disservice to all of us.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, the pandemic is a great case study for a lot of this stuff because there were so many things in there where you can see it's almost like short-term benefits of lying, basically. Like the masks was the big one, right? Where that it's obvious that you want health professionals to have enough access to medical masks, and that if everybody rushes the market and buys up all the medical masks, it's not going to be a good thing for the healthcare system. And so early on, there was the advice was don't wear masks, and masks are ineffective, and maybe they actually make it worse because then you're going to be touching your face more. It's like, even at the time, I was like, that doesn't make sense. We're wearing masks. I'm going to do this, but then that became so. Again, there were clear incentives why you would not want to have all of the public knowing the actual truth about that. But again, it's like if you think critically about it, you can think, okay, well, I can understand why they're saying that advice, but that if I'm interested in my own protection, I'm still going to wear a mask. Another thing was panic buying food, right? Of course, you want to tell the public, don't panic buy food. There's going to be enough food. Food supply is not going to be a problem, and so on. Of course, that's what you want to say to the public. And I was like, no, bollocks to that. We're getting tinned food. We're filling up the garage with tinned food. And of course, a week later, well, all the supermarket shelves are empty now. Now, there's a little bit of chicken and egg there, right? Because, of course, people do panic buy, and that's what caused it to some extent. But, yeah, there was a couple of instances where that trust was lost, where they almost need, I don't want to say that they needed to lie, but you could see their incentives for lying in that sense, but the long-term cost was so much worse.
I remember that. I remember the masks episode. It happened in Quebec, Canada, where I live. The government made it clear, very clear, that masks were ineffective and don't go purchase masks. And then they did a 180 without any explanation and justification, and started saying that masks were essential to protecting yourself. How do you explain that? And I think the biggest sign of just stupid policies coming from the government was how they closed down all of the mom and pop shops around because of sanitary reasons to stop the spread of the virus. But then Costco was open.
Right.
And you had this huge crowd in Costco, and that was such a blatant nonsense. What are you doing? This is mad scientist stuff. Just putting out the craziest policies. Restaurants, so many of them disappeared completely. Montreal used to be amazing. It's improving. It used to be amazing in terms of food, that was available. The restaurant quality was amazing. After COVID, it became, horrible. It became very boring. Now it's improving. But so many restaurant owners took their life because of financial despair. I mean, who was held accountable for that? No investigative commission or something to examine what we've done in terms of policies and why did some people push certain agendas on us. Well, if you're not doing that, then how are you going to reestablish trust in the government? And then their solution is to enforce limitations on free speech. That's how we're going to
right. That'll
put
do the
back,
trick.
yes, we're going to shut them up, and that's how they're going to trust vaccines again. I'm sorry, but you've just made yourself even more untrustworthy. Now you're becoming a hostile entity to your people. So yeah, I don't know who is advising them, but it's not a smart person.
Yeah, that short-term thinking, I think about that with respect to a lot of the meatheads, the Freddie Leroy's and Frank Mitlohners and so on. Like, clearly they have some sort of short-term incentives to be spreading disinformation that kind of implies that there's no need to reduce our meat consumption. But then I think, do these people not want a habitable planet for their children? Like, do you know what I mean? It's so short-term. Like, what? Do you not care if you're increasing the chances that there's going to be another pandemic? Do you not care if, like, you're Sean Baker and you are like definitely increasing the risk of heart disease amongst all of the young men who listen to you and stuff like this? Like, it's a combination of like selfishness and just short-term thinking. Particularly for the environmental guys, because like Frank Mitloehner, who does the methane cycling and all of the disinformation around that, like implying that, you know, oh, maybe cows are actually good for the environment. Like, he's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. Does he not think about what the actual implications of me doing this in 50 years' time or 100 years' time? Like, my kids and grandkids are going to have to live on this planet that I'm teeing up for them. Like, it's so short-sighted. Surely it's mental. I don't know what to say about that. It's just, yeah, its own form of stupidity, I guess.
Yeah, or maybe they just don't care, and it's a form of psychopathy. That's something else that
Right.
deeply fascinates me. How many psychopaths are out there,
Mm.
and why, as a society, haven't we done our homework of just detecting them? Just as we filter out, people with intelligence disability from the army, we should look at the healthcare world and filter out psychopaths from there. Like, a psychiatrist should not be a psychopath. Like,
yeah, that seems like a good rule.
yeah, they should not be in contact with vulnerable populations. They have predatory behaviors that it's just reality. We understand that, we've studied that in depth, and I think that as a society we should come up with some kind of policy to manage that. But we're just in denial of that. We pretend that psychopaths do not exist, and that they're not actually influencing how things go in our society. And we're made stupider for that, and in dangerous situations because of that, because those people genuinely don't care. It's not their fault. I'm not saying they should be punished for that. Absolutely not. It's just how their brain is wired. So yeah, that is frustrating to ponder on that.
Yeah. How easy is it to avoid? If you're stupid, it's not that easy to avoid detection. If you open your mouth, you're pretty much going to reveal it, right? If you're a psychopath, is it easier to avoid? You can act like a non-psychopath, or no?
I mean, they say you have met at least a few psychopaths in your life. Every one of us. And there are people, when I think about it, that I think we're pretty much, psychopathic in their behaviors. So yeah, I guess that answers the question. They're really good at disguising themselves, really good at fitting in and manipulating us. And also, they're not, I think they're not wired for deep, committed relationships. I think that it's always short term with them, romantic relationships, and also like friends, friendly relationships. And so you don't have much time to examine closely that person. It's always so short term that they got what they wanted from you, and that's it. It's very transactional, and they're gone from your life after that, hopefully.
Right. Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, How many slaughterhouse Tizen people executives are actually psychopaths? That's a question that is, I think, worth asking. I think there are activists out there who think we can gain them to our cause and think that those big industries are just looking for profit or something like that. Well, what if they enjoy inflicting pain and that much death? What if that brings them joy? I've heard one activist talk about how um, people who own humane operations, like little farms where they raise a few animals and they slaughter them themselves, that some of them are actually very sadistic about this and enjoy the experience of owning that animal and slaughtering it, while presenting themselves as humane. Um, Now, is it too far-fetched to suggest that some of the big executives that in big ag world get some enjoyment from inflicting that much pain and destruction? Maybe not.
Yeah.
That's another question worth asking.
Yeah. No, I can well imagine it. Yeah, that's very troubling to think about. But yeah, I think that's totally true. I think isn't there? I vaguely have it in my mind that a lot of CEOs and stuff are psychopaths, right? I think that there's some sort of correlation there.
They say that, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I work in the nonprofit world, and I was expecting to work with angels. I was expecting that everyone would be this, wholesome and dedicating their lives to advancing goodness in society and making this world a better place. I know how cheesy that sounds. But then I met so many people in positions of leadership in the nonprofit world that are very predatory, like extremely so. And I realized that they are attracted to the nonprofit world because they want to be close to vulnerable populations.
Damn.
It's like pedophiles looking for jobs at the school, or wanting to become a scout monitor or something.
Right.
Same thing. So yeah, it is worrying that there's no tracking system, monitoring system, public health policy to track those personality types in our society.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn. Well, that seems like a problem too large for us to solve now. Do you want to talk a bit about the Dharma stuff?
Sure,
I've
I
got
can.
nearly 2 hours, so I won't keep you too much longer, but I'm interested to hear about what you're doing on that side as well.
Of course. Thank you for asking. So, Dharma Voices for Animals was created by a bunch of Buddhists who were wondering how come there aren't more Buddhists who are vegan. And basically, we make the Buddhist argument for veganism. We inform Buddhist populations, institutions, and leaders of what's happening with factory farming, and we, convince them to transition their institutions to plant-based only, model, and to support advocacy work related to passing animal welfare legislations and so on. It's faith-based advocacy, not very popular in the movement, but extremely impactful. Like, I've become convinced that this is the way to make real lasting change. It's to change religious institutions. Like, we're spending so much time and resources on street outreach, but we should be reaching out to the religious leaders who have a whole lot of people that follow their every word and look at them as a moral example. Like, most people don't get don't look at Peter Singer as a moral compass. They look at their rabbi, their imam, and their Buddhist monk. And so, that's, I think, the most impactful way um, uh, we can make a difference. I truly believe that. So if we gain religious leaders to our cause, it's a permanent thing. It's not like, political advocacy. And they will speak to a wider audience, and they are, the ones that set moral standards in society for most people. So they should be the prime target of our advocacy work, and we should, at the very least, hold them accountable to, animal welfare issues and all of that. They should not be permitted to stay silent on that very pressing issue. And so, yeah, I invite everyone to follow my example and, look into who are the religious leaders in your town or neighborhood, like church leaders, or who knows who, and give them a copy of Animal Welfare and World Religion from what's her name, Joyce De Silva, or start a conversation, about factory farming, and try to convince them to maybe do a screening of Dominion in one of their church gathering community event. Yeah, I think that would make an enormous impact. And yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing what I'm preaching, and reaching out to Buddhist leaders and advancing animal welfare through that.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I agree with you. It's a really underrated, like, leverage point or bottleneck you could think of, because I feel like there's a decent amount of now, let's have doctors talking about the health stuff. People trust doctors to be authorities on what is going to be healthy for you. And we do actually have figures who people trust to be an authority on what's going to be the right or moral or ethical thing to do as well. But it's not really something that we've done too much advocacy on, it seems. Buddhism seems like a good fit for it. Like, but a lot of Buddhists are vegetarian, at least already, I guess, and Hinduism as well, right? There's like a tenet of the religion almost, and I guess Jainism, and there might be another couple of other, like, typically Eastern religions that are like this. Do you think it's as tractable for Christian or Jewish or Muslim communities? Like, this, from my perspective, it seems like there's a decent amount of justifying eating meat with a religious basis from the Abrahamic religions.
Yes, I do believe so. And there are so many incredible, passionate leaders out there who, like, let me give you an example. Daniel Mascarenhas, that's someone I interviewed a couple of times on my podcast. He's a Jesuit priest in training, based in Boston, and a passionate vegan. And he actually created the website called the vegancatholic.org, where he presents, the Catholic argument for veganism. Now, he's really passionate about this. He has done his homeworks. Like, he knows all about why Christianity goes hand in hand with veganism and not exploiting animals. But, who is talking to him? What organization is featuring him? Who is giving him funding? And the answer is no one. Like, that movie, Conspiracy, that I won't call it a documentary. It's a docu-fiction. I think the technical term is for that kind of media stuff. Never reached out to Daniel, to talk about the what would be appealing for Catholics to hear about veganism. They just went on and presented some very unattractive arguments for Christians to go vegan. And truly, that documentary uh, is a huge indicator of where we are as a movement, because it was celebrated by everyone, yet it missed the point. It should have been made to appeal to like the Christian population, but it's not appealing to the Christian population. Um, and people like Daniel could have been perfect to give their insight into how to best convince Christians to consider veganism. Um, there are 100 more people like Daniel out there in Judaism, with the Unitarian Church. I don't know about the Catholic Church. Well, I know a teacher at Stanford who is doing some work with different, Catholic institutions, and they're receptive to him and his message. And so, yeah, it's just that you don't hear about it, and I think it has to do with that bias of, most vegans, animal rights activists are not religious, are not interested in talking about religion, and if they talk about religion, it's to talk about how religion has participated in creating this culture of exploiting animals, which is true, but how is it productive for this movement to keep, religious people out of it and make them the scapegoat for animal exploitation? Not productive at all. So I do think there are like powerful arguments to present to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, to invite them to become vegan. There's another book I could recommend called Animals and Islam. Was written by an imam who I think was based in the UK. We lost him. I think he died now, but he had a level of success. He was invited to a few mosques where he gave presentations about it. We have Zahra Abbas, another one who is active on the Muslim front, who has founded Green Islam, another great initiative. We have Animetrics, who is studying, everything that has to do with halal and how, it aligns with animal welfareism. And, I mention Islam because most people think that's the furthest religion from, the animal welfare message. Yet you have all of those people and active advocates in that space. And so, yeah, there is potential. The material is there. We know what to say. We know what to do. We know who to target. We just need support, like financial support, resources, and more, media coverage.
Yeah. Well, that's really good news because, yeah, of course, Islam's the biggest religion as well, right? I think it's like 20% of people in the world or something crazy like that. Like, it's huge. So, yeah, really good to know that that's tractable and that there are people working on it. And I agree with you. It's definitely going to be an underexplored area and an under-financed area, and something that could do with a lot more resources going into that kind of initiative. Your organization's Dharma Voices for Animals.
Yes,
so people can
Dharma
give that
Voices.
a Google.
Yes, please, and consider donating to the organization. Always appreciated. Yeah, the employees are amazing too. A good sign that an organization is in good health is when their employees give back to the organization. So, I give back to them even though they are my employer and client, and I know the other employees too, and so that shows you how much we believe in that mission and its impact. So yeah, consider making a donation.
Awesome. Awesome. I just put the link for dumbvoicesforanimals.org in the chat so people can check that out. Awesome. Bryant, thanks so much for the conversation. This was excellent. We did 2 hours in the end.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. This was my first live stream, and I had a great experience. Invite me back whenever you want.
Absolutely.
Would love to have more of those conversations.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. See you soon.
All right. We'll speak soon.